If you have watched my videos before, then you already know that nearly every great prophet has cast a dark shadow over the year 2025. The year has become a focal point of prophecy for countless seers across history. But as we followed the clues left behind by these prophets, another discovery emerged, one that made everything feel even more ominous. And this was a forgotten prophecy, one that came from a Zen master who lived over 1,000 years ago, a man revered as one of the 7 greatest seers in the history of ancient China. His name was Hango Xiun, and within a nearly lost collection of classical poems, he left behind 14 prophetic verses. Astonishingly, 12 of those 14 have already come true. Only 2 remain, and one of them speaks of a world-shifting event in the year 2025. So what exactly did this ancient monk foresee? In today's story, we will uncover this mysterious prophecy and explore the chilling accuracy of what Hango Xiun predicted. Buckle up and get ready as we dive into today's unsolved mystery. But first, do not forget to hit the like and subscribe button before this video ends. You might just have incredible luck if you do. Europe has its share of famous prophets figures like Nostradamus, who are often invoked as the quintessential symbols of prophecy. But in the East, there exists a figure no less revered by later generations. His name was Zen Master Hango Xiun, and he was remembered not only as a deeply enlightened monk, but also as a prophet whose visions transcended time itself. Hango Xiun lived during China's Tang Dynasty, more than 1,000 years ago. He was not your typical mystic. He did not travel from town to town delivering cryptic sermons or promising salvation to the masses. Instead, Hango withdrew from the world, dedicating his life to asceticism and deep meditation. He believed that only by letting go of worldly attachments could one truly grasp the essence of the universe. But even in his reclusive state, Hango Xiun was not a man disconnected from history. His life had moments that would leave an indelible mark on the annals of time. One of the most memorable of these events was when he struck the future Emperor Xuanzong of Tang squarely across the face. This shocking act of defiance was meant to teach the young ruler about compassion and humility. Now, I know what you are thinking. How could a monk dare to raise his hand to a future emperor? It is a rare and audacious act in any culture, but it revealed something fundamental about Hango Xiun's character. He was not just a spiritual recluse. He was a man with a vision that defied the limitations of his era. When Emperor Xuanzong eventually ascended the throne, he did not retaliate. Instead, he bestowed upon Hango Xiun a dharma title, the Rude Monk. It was a humorous yet deeply respectful moniker, but it did not stop there. The emperor ordered all of Hango Xiun's teachings to be transcribed, and it is from these teachings that we have the 14 prophetic poems, a collection so rich with symbolism and cryptic meaning that no one could have predicted just how eerily accurate these poems would become. The 14 verses left behind by Zen Master Hango Xiun were more than just teachings of wisdom. They were deeply cryptic, filled with symbolic language that only future generations would begin to understand. These poems were written in a classical style, rich in allegory and metaphor. To the untrained eye, they might seem like simple philosophical musings. But upon deeper investigation, something remarkable began to happen. The events foretold in the poems started coming true. From the fall of the Ming Dynasty to the rise of the Qing Dynasty, from the turbulence of political upheavals to the cultural flourishing of China's most illustrious emperors, Hango's verses seemed to capture the entire sweep of Chinese history. It was as if Hango Xiun had lived through centuries of history, perhaps not physically, but through his extraordinary ability to see the future with such clarity. But here's where things take a truly bizarre turn. There were 2 prophecies that no one could have anticipated, the final 2 poems in the collection. These verses did not just speak of things that had already happened. They spoke of something that was still to come. And one of those prophecies spoke of the year 2025. Now we must ask ourselves, why would a Zen master living over a millennium ago leave behind a prophetic trace of a year far beyond his time? Why, of all the years, would 2025 hold such significance? What could have driven Hango to foretell events so far into the future? To answer that, we must first examine the prophecy itself. The prophecy from Hango Xiun is not just cryptic. It is chilling. The 13th poem explicitly mentions the year 2025. Here's the part that is particularly unnerving. In the year of the rat, the world reels from plague. The West shall again witness the rise of one from the South. By the year of the snake, all shall return to the center. The year of the rat corresponds to 2020, and we all know what happened in that year. The world was gripped by a pandemic like no other. Cities were paralyzed, economies faltered, and countless lives were affected. The first part of the prophecy had already come true. But what about the second part? The year of the snake corresponds to 2025. What could this prophecy be hinting at? The line, "The West shall again witness the rise of one from the South," has left many to speculate. What does this mean? Could it refer to geopolitical shifts, with nations in the global South gaining influence and power? Or could it hint at a spiritual or societal upheaval where the forgotten voices of the world's marginalized communities rise up? And then there is the second half of the prophecy, "All shall return to the center." This phrase has captured the imagination of many. What is the center? Could it be a reference to China, the Middle Kingdom, the center of the world in traditional Chinese thought? Or is it something far more abstract, a return to the center of human civilization itself? As we explore this prophecy further, we must examine the historical context that surrounds it. How has Hango Xiun's vision of 2025 played out in history? What do we see in the world today that mirrors his predictions? And most importantly, what does this prophecy mean for the future? Hango Xiun's first prophetic verse was about the fall of the Ming Dynasty. The Ming, at its height, was a symbol of Chinese grandeur. It was a dynasty that achieved extraordinary cultural and political success. Yet, despite its early brilliance, the Ming Dynasty fell into chaos. Natural disasters struck relentlessly. Famine spread across the land. The empire became riddled with corruption, and violent uprisings threatened to tear the kingdom apart. Hango's first poem spoke of the disruption of the sun and moon, two celestial symbols that, by sheer coincidence, mirrored the official emblem of the Ming Dynasty itself. This imagery served as a metaphor for the kingdom's decline, and as the Ming Dynasty entered its final years, the metaphor became reality. The Ming Dynasty ultimately fell in 1644, after a rebellion led by a former soldier named Li Zicheng. The rebellion culminated in the breach of Beijing, the capital. Emperor Chongzhen, the last ruler of the Ming, took his own life in a final act of despair beneath an ancient tree. It was a haunting moment in history, and yet it was one that Hango Xiun had predicted centuries before it happened. But Hango's prophecy did not end with the fall of the Ming Dynasty. Beneath the sorrow of collapse, Hango foresaw a shift, a new beginning. From the ashes of the Ming came the Qing Dynasty, and with it, a new chapter in Chinese history. After the fall of the Ming Dynasty, the Qing Dynasty emerged as the new ruling power in China. Initially dismissed by many as a makeshift regime, the Qing Dynasty would go on to prove its strength. Founded by the Manchu people from the northern frontier, the Qing was seen by some as a foreign dynasty that lacked the cultural refinement and political legacy of the Ming. However, the Qing Dynasty would eventually become one of the longest-lasting and most powerful empires in Chinese history. At the center of this transformation was a young emperor named Kangxi. He ascended the throne at just 8 years old, and although his reign began in turmoil, he would later go on to become one of China's most revered emperors. Under his rule, the Qing Dynasty would reach its political zenith, expanding its borders, consolidating power, and ushering in a period of unprecedented cultural flourishing. What is truly astonishing is that the rise of Emperor Kangxi and the remarkable success of his reign was predicted by Hango Xiun over 800 years earlier. In his second prophetic verse, Hango spoke of a young ruler who would rise to power in the midst of uncertainty, and who would go on to rule for an extraordinary 61 years. The prophecy was eerily specific. Kangxi's reign was, in fact, 61 years long, exactly as Hango had foreseen. Under his leadership, China saw an era of strength and stability, which mirrored the prosperity foretold in the poem. Kangxi's rise to power was not a simple story of a monarch taking the throne. His childhood was filled with struggle and manipulation. He came of age in a court racked by power struggles, and during his early years, it was his regent, Oboi, who controlled the empire. Despite being the titular emperor, Kangxi was a mere puppet in Oboi's hands. However, Kangxi's story was not one of submission. At the age of 16, Kangxi turned the tables on Oboi in a dramatic coup that would define his reign. The young emperor invited Oboi to a palace banquet under the guise of friendship. But when Oboi accidentally dropped a cup, a grave insult in the formal court etiquette, Kangxi seized the opportunity to arrest him on the spot. This move struck a devastating blow to Oboi's power, and Kangxi proved himself to be not just a ruler in name, but a man with the political cunning and strength to lead China into a new era. This dramatic turn of events was not only predicted in Hango Xiun's poems, but also depicted in vivid detail. Hango's second verse had hinted at a young emperor's rise, and even the 61-year reign was explicitly foretold. The prophecy's accuracy was not limited to broad strokes, but extended to specific events that would unfold in Kangxi's life, making the prophecy appear almost prophetic in its precision. After the reign of Kangxi, the Qing Dynasty continued to thrive under the leadership of his grandson, Emperor Qianlong. Qianlong ascended the throne in 1735, inheriting a stable empire that had already been consolidated under Kangxi's rule. Initially, many believed that Qianlong's reign would be a continuation of the prosperity that had come before. But as Hango Xiun's fourth prophetic poem predicted, Qianlong would lead China to the peak of its imperial grandeur. Under Qianlong, China expanded its borders and strengthened its military power. His reign marked a high point in China's imperial history, with cultural achievements and economic prosperity that would define an era. The Qing Dynasty controlled vast territories and exerted influence over neighboring regions, and Chinese citizens enjoyed a period of stability and prosperity. But just as the prophecy foretold, Qianlong's reign also marked the beginning of China's eventual decline. Although his early years were filled with success, Qianlong's later reign became marked by stagnation, corruption, and a growing resistance to change. His refusal to modernize and adapt to the changing global landscape set the stage for the challenges China would face in the 19th century. Hango Xiun's prophecy did not stop at Qianlong's rise. It also predicted the decline that would follow. As the Qing Dynasty entered the 19th century, the empire began to face internal strife, economic stagnation, and increasing pressure from foreign powers. The brilliance of the Qing's early years dimmed, and the prophecy spoke of a heavy red dragon, a symbol that would come to represent the forces of decay and collapse. By the time Qianlong stepped down in 1795, the Qing Dynasty had reached the height of its power, but the seeds of its eventual decline had already been planted. His abdication marked the end of an era, but it was not the end of the Qing Dynasty's control over China. Qianlong remained in power as the retired emperor for another 4 years, continuing to influence political decisions behind the scenes. After his death, China entered a period of deep crisis. The White Lotus Rebellion, a massive uprising fueled by religious fervor, tore through parts of China, while corruption continued to spread, unchecked throughout the imperial bureaucracy. The weakening of the Qing government set the stage for further turmoil, leading to China's vulnerability when foreign powers, particularly Britain, began to exert their influence. In 1839, as part of the Qing Dynasty's refusal to adapt to global economic changes, China's government attempted to suppress the opium trade. This sparked the First Opium War with Britain, and China's inability to defend itself against British military superiority resulted in a humiliating defeat. The Treaty of Nanking, signed in 1842, forced China to open its ports to foreign trade, leading to the dismantling of the imperial system. Once again, Hango Xiun's prophecy seemed to be unfolding with unnerving accuracy. The fall of the Qing Dynasty and the ensuing crises were predicted in his verses long before they took place. The heavy red dragon symbolized the beginning of China's modern Dark Age, and the prophecy foresaw the unraveling of China's imperial power as it faced both internal unrest and external threats. While the Qing Dynasty's fall was a central theme in Hango Xiun's poems, the prophecy also extends far beyond the borders of China. The fifth prophetic poem, which describes the emergence of the heavy red dragon and the subsequent collapse, resonates with events that are still unfolding today. The world has seen a series of unprecedented crises, from the collapse of the Soviet Union to the trauma of September 11, 2001, and the 2020 pandemic. As we stand on the brink of 2025, Hango's prophecy casts an eerie shadow over the future. Will the rise of forces from the south, the geopolitical shifts that are increasingly evident, signal a new era of global power dynamics? Could we be witnessing the beginning of the end for Western dominance in world affairs? In his final 2 verses, Hango Xiun does not just speak of individuals or empires. He speaks to humanity itself. The prophecy's reference to returning to the center could signify a shift in the balance of power, a return to China as the center of the world, as it once saw itself in ancient times. Or perhaps it suggests something even more profound, a rebalancing of the world order, where the old power structures are dismantled and new forces rise. As the year 2025 approaches, we must ask, what will this prophecy mean for us? What will happen when the forces foretold by Hango Xiun finally converge? Will it bring a new beginning, or will it mark the end of an era? Let us now focus on the final part of Hango Xiun's prophecy, which directly addresses the year 2025. The poem reads, "In the year of the rat, the world reels from plague. The West shall again witness the rise of one from the South. By the year of the snake, all shall return to the center." We have already seen how the first part of the prophecy came true with the global pandemic in 2020. The year of the rat, according to the Chinese zodiac, corresponds to 2020. And indeed, the world was consumed by a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic that changed everything. Cities went into lockdowns, economies suffered, and millions of lives were lost. What Hango Xiun foresaw in that first line was a world reeling from a plague, a crisis unlike any other in recent memory. But what about the next part? The prophecy continues, "The West shall again witness the rise of one from the South." This line is both intriguing and mysterious. What could it mean? Let us break it down. Many interpretations have surfaced over the years. Some suggest that the one from the South refers to a shift in global power, with countries from the global South such as China, India, or Latin America rising to prominence and challenging the Western powers that have traditionally dominated the world stage. In fact, we are already seeing signs of this shift. China's growing influence in global politics and economics, the rise of emerging markets in the South, and the increasing cultural power of non-Western nations could all point to the fulfillment of this prophecy. Others believe that this line could be more figurative, referring to social and political movements that rise from the margins, from the forgotten or oppressed communities that challenge the established systems of power in the West. We have seen this in recent years, with movements calling for racial justice, economic equality, and environmental change gaining momentum worldwide. But the prophecy does not stop there. It concludes with the cryptic line, "By the year of the snake, all shall return to the center." This is perhaps the most fascinating and unsettling part of the prophecy. What does it mean for all to return to the center? Many believe that this refers to China's potential return to its position as the central power in the world, as it once saw itself in ancient times. The Middle Kingdom, as China has often referred to itself, believed that all things revolved around it. In the past century, China's influence on the global stage has waned, but the prophecy may be hinting at a resurgence, a time when China reasserts itself as the dominant force in the world. There is also the possibility that this return to the center symbolizes a rebalancing of the world order. Could this be a call for global unity, a time when the power dynamics between East and West shift, and the world begins to work more cohesively as a single entity? The center could represent a more balanced, interconnected world where no single nation or region holds too much power. As we approach 2025, the question remains, what comes next? We have seen the pandemic unfold, fulfilling part of Hango Xiun's prophecy. But what about the rise from the South and the return to the center? These lines seem to suggest that we are standing at a pivotal moment in history. The next few years could see significant geopolitical shifts, both in terms of national power and global influence. The rise of one from the South might refer to the growing prominence of nations like China, India, and Brazil, which are increasingly asserting their influence on the world stage. These countries have long been marginalized in the global power structure, but their economic growth, cultural impact, and political influence are undeniable. We are already witnessing a shift in power, and Hango's prophecy seems to be echoing this change. However, there is also the possibility that this rise refers to social, cultural, or spiritual movements that challenge the traditional order of power. As the world faces crises related to climate change, inequality, and political instability, movements from the global South are gaining momentum, advocating for a more equitable and sustainable world. These movements may represent the one from the South that Hango Xiun foresaw, a force of change that rises from the margins and challenges the established powers. As for the return to the center, It is a fascinating concept. Could this be a return to balance? A world where power is no longer concentrated in a single region, but is shared more equally? Or could it be a reassertion of China's position at the center of the world? China has been increasingly vocal about its ambitions to lead in global governance, economics, and even technology. Its Belt and Road Initiative, its push for a digital yuan, and its growing military presence are all signs of China's desire to reshape the global order. Could 2025 be the year when China reclaims its place at the center? Just as Hango Xiun's prophecy suggested. Alternatively, the center could refer to a broader philosophical or spiritual shift. As the world grapples with existential challenges, climate change, global pandemics, political instability, the idea of returning to the center might symbolize a return to core values, cooperation, unity, and respect for the planet. In this sense, the prophecy may be hinting at a fundamental change in human consciousness, where the center is no longer a political or economic construct, but a spiritual one. As we approach the year 2025, it is impossible to ignore the convergence of global forces that could shape the future. The geopolitical shifts, the rise of new powers, the growing calls for social justice and environmental responsibility, and the increasing fragmentation of the global order. These forces are all at play, and they will come to a head in the coming years. But the prophecy is not just a call to observe these shifts, it is a warning. All shall return to the center may not simply be a statement of political power, but it could be a plea for humanity to come together, to find common ground, and to work toward a more equitable, sustainable future. The forces of division and conflict that have defined the modern world may soon face a reckoning, and the prophecy asks us whether we are ready to change course. As we stand on the precipice of 2025, we must ask, what does the future hold? Will we see a shift in global power, with nations from the global south rising to challenge the West? Will China reassert its dominance on the world stage? Or will we witness a more profound change, a return to the center of human civilization, where the world comes together to address the challenges of our time? Hango Xiun's prophecy may have been written over 1,000 years ago, but its relevance today is undeniable. The forces he spoke of, plague, the rise of the South, the return to the center, are all part of a larger, ongoing transformation. Whether these changes manifest as political shifts, social movements, or spiritual awakenings, they will shape the world for generations to come. The future is uncertain, but one thing is clear. The events of 2025 will likely mark a turning point in human history. It is up to us, each one of us, to decide what kind of world we want to live in and what role we will play in shaping the future. If today's story made you stop and think, then you are not alone. The prophecy of Zen Master Hango Xiun is a powerful reminder that we stand at a crucial moment in history. The choices we make today will shape the world we leave behind for future generations. If the world is indeed changing, then it is up to us to make sure that change is for the better. As Hango Xiun wrote in his final poem, "What comes next must be asked of those who come after. The power to shape a brighter future lies in our hands. Let us not let it slip away unnoticed." If you found this story thought-provoking, share your thoughts in the comments below. And do not forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more intriguing stories. I will see you in the next one.